It is easy to think that Minesweeper is just a silly little game that you only really play when you have absolutely nothing better to be doing. But look past its deceptively simple design and you'll find a game that, while basic, especially compared to modern gaming, there is clever and intelligent design to it that is easy to play and difficult to master. It surprised me that with all the clones of many other titles, there hasn't been some kind of reimagining of Minesweeper yet. But the game we're looking at today certainly comes close to a reimagined Minesweeper. Shellblast is a puzzle game developed and published by Vertigo Gaming Inc. It released September 3rd, 2007 and recently received a re-release with its edition in the Vertigo Gaming Inc. Legacy Edition bundle. Shellblast takes a similar approach to that of Minesweeper, but modernises the concept to create a unique and intense experience that really makes you feel like a bomb specialist, but suffers from massive difficulty curves, making progression challenging. In the plot to Shellblast, a new dawn of terrorism has begun to sweep the world, killing innocent people and inspiring others to follow them. Their sole goal is to create fear and chaos among the many countries of the world, and you are the only one who can put a stop to it. You must travel throughout the world disarming the many bombs this terrorist organisation has planted and put an end to their reign of terror. That is pretty much it of what little plot Shellblast has. It does the job it is intended to, and that is to create a setting and a goal. Other than that, it is all about the gameplay. The objective of Shellblast is to travel to various continents throughout the world, disarming the bombs the terrorists have planted before they explode. The game is divided into numerous episodes or chapters, each with their own array of bombs to disarm. The order at which you disarm them is up to you, but all must be completed before being able to disarm the nuke and moving on to the next chapter. Having the ability to disarm the bombs in any order results in some freedom, meaning if you get stuck on any one in particular, you can just leave it and come back to it later as you attempt to stop the others. Having this freedom stops the pacing from coming to a grinding halt while you are stuck on that one bomb, but sooner or later you will need to complete it in order to progress. As you progress further in the game, the bombs begin to evolve, becoming harder to disarm with new dangers along with completely new types of bombs, all of which I will go into further detail shortly. Having these new and upgraded bombs keeps the game feeling fresh with new challenges that really put the skills you have learned to the absolute test. With each new or upgraded bomb you receive a new short tutorial on how to deal with them, meaning you are never left without the details when tackling unknown grounds. The tutorials are pretty basic in design but are informative enough to get all the details you need across without taking long periods of time to explain, keeping the pace of the game moving. Then there is the actual disarming of the bombs. How this works is that each level has a unique design grid. Your objective is to find the pistons of the bomb and mark them with an exclamation mark before the timer runs out. Run out of time, or mismark any of the pistons, you will fail the mission, resulting in the bomb exploding. Each time you start a mission, the pistons are randomly placed on the grid, meaning their locations change every time you restart a mission. There are no walkthroughs for this game, you need to figure out these puzzles for yourself. Having the piston locations move each time you start a mission is great, as each and every time the level is different, but it is a double-edged sword. The problem with this is that the difficulty of the level changes depending on the RNG and the layout of the level. There were numerous times where a level was giving me great difficulty and all of a sudden, because of the RNG being generous, the level was suddenly very merciless and easy to solve. This is an issue that primarily affects the early levels of the game, as the grids are more individually laid out, resulting in you easily being able to single out certain rows. But later on in the game, the grids become more clustered, making it harder to single out rows. So yes, at the start of the game you are at the mercy of the RNG and positioning of the pistons as to how difficult the level will be. The next question is, how do you figure out what are pistons and what are duds on the grid? Using the WASD keys you can move two gold lines on the grid which are called SDUs. These lines detect how many pistons are on the grid rows they highlight over. The number of pistons these lines detect is shown in the top right hand corner of the screen, along with the total number of pistons on the grid. You need to move these lines, one going left and right, the other up and down, and figure out where the pistons are. Generally the best way to start off is by finding what I call dead rows, which are rows that detect 0 pistons. These give you a starting point to work from, making it easier to detect the pistons. But not all levels give you dead rows, meaning you need to figure out the bomb without having a 0 point to work with. Using the SDUs is easy enough to come to grips with, but very difficult to master. It is the kind of mechanic that requires your brain to be firing on all cylinders, as there is a lot of movement with the SDUs to do, a lot of information to take in, and a clock rapidly counting down with intense rock music kicking in when the timer reaches a certain point. It really creates an absorbing and intense experience. Sometimes, however, the SDUs alone are not enough to solve a bomb, and with that you have the help of chaffs and pulse lines. Chaffs are one-time use grenades that allow you to reveal whether or not a tile on the grid is a dud or a piston. You will only have a certain amount of shafts to use in a level and often take a certain amount of time before you gain another one. It is important to use them sparingly as they can be the difference between success and failure. The pulse or pulse line, as I call it, is a one-time use in later missions that allows you to completely take out one line on the grid. If there are any pistons on that line, they will move to other tiles on the grid, even those you previously marked down as duds. It is a great tool for creating a starting point in the later, more difficult levels. Using the pulse and the shafts at the right time can really make or break you in the later levels. The levels often become more of a case of placing the pulse in the right place to get you started, while using the chaffs to figure out the coin flip situations you often find yourself in. I can't count how many times I found myself stuck wondering which of these two is the piston and which is the dud, and having no chaffs left to help. Having these tools add another layer of depth to the game, but they also cause it to lose its main appeal in later levels. The more clustered the levels become, the more you are relying on placing the pulse in the right spot to even get started. The tools turn into the star of the show when it should be the SDUs. It results in the levels getting extremely complicated later on, not to mention frustrating as you're trying to figure out the best point to use the tools. As opposed to being a handy addition to your arsenal, they become mandatory in your success, and the game is less for it. Shellblast is at its best when you're using the SDUs to figure out the puzzle by yourself. The game feels much fairer and you gain a lot more self-pride and accomplishment from it. Later in the game, however, the tools become the reason for success, while you and your skills with the SDU are an afterthought. And the more I played the game and progressed, the less interested and more frustrated I was getting. As previously mentioned, the further into the game you progress, the more complex the bombs become, along with new ones appearing. At the start of the game you'll only be dealing with the standard bombs, that being the explosive class. These are simply a case of figuring out and correctly marking the piston locations. Then there are the more complex ones, such as the biological bomb, where you can only mark the piston locations. Any incorrect marking of the pistons or applying any other markings other than the exclamation mark will result in a time penalty, rapidly lowering your time to complete the bomb. You also sometimes have to deal with mixed bombs that are a combination of two. An example of this would be biological mixed with a bomb that doesn't allow you to see how many pistons there are in total. This means you not only have to find the pistons using only one type of marking, but also figure out exactly how many there are. Having the different kinds of bombs really mixes up the gameplay, as there are a number of each type to choose from at the beginning of each chapter, which really helps the gameplay feel fresh and all the bomb types working exceptionally well. While that is what the campaign of Shellblast consists of, there is still a whole lot more to experience with the game, with additional modes being available to play. These modes are Simulation Chamber, Endurance Mode, Blast Editor, Shell Drop, Puzzled and Nuke. Simulation Chamber allows you to make a level by choosing the grid size, bomb type, piston count, chaff count and so on. Once you make your choices on all the options, you can then generate the level and play it. It is a nice addition when you have completed the campaign or have become bored of it, that lets you play a level under your conditions as you see fit. Endurance Mode has you attempting to complete 7 chambers of a grid one by one, with each one you unlock making the overall grid bigger each time. The objective is to unlock all the chambers and then finally complete it as one big grid. It is an enjoyable mode that definitely puts your skills to the test when figuring out grids of varying sizes, and definitely gives an intense experience as one mistake and you have to start over. Blast Editor allows you to make your own levels by placing tiles on the grid, making the level as big or as small as you like. You can then save your level to your hard drive and share it with others if you want to, or just play it for your own enjoyment. It is a great addition to the game that allows players to get creative and make their own layouts of Doom. Shell Drop puts the player figuring out bomb after bomb, with them gaining points for disarming them along with gaining additional points for speed, not having to use tools like chaffs, and for flawless runs where you don't lose any lives. You have a total of 3 lives. If you mismark a bomb you will lose a life, but if you run out of time it's game over. It's a cool and intense arcade mode style minigame that really separates the gameplay from the base game while keeping what makes it already good. It is fun and really gets intense the further you progress, not to mention having a scoreboard to try and top. Puzzled is a small mode that has you play 3 different handmade grids of varying difficulty. The first being a small one, the second a medium-sized one, and the third a pretty big one, with each growing in difficulty along with size. The twist here is that you have no control over the SDUs, instead you need to use a series of preset SDUs to determine the location of the pistons. It is a nice little addition that changes up how you play the game. Finally is Nuke mode. This is placing you right in the middle of a nuke that is being disarmed by an NPC agent. You need to help the agent disarm the bomb, but he isn't the most reliable of bomb specialists. While he does indeed find pistons, he can mark tiles as pistons and then tell you it is wrong and that you should change it. Essentially you are working to solve the bomb while also trying to keep up with the NPC agent and fixing his mistakes at the same time, with the clock quickly counting down. It is a fun mode that can get really intense, and is definitely worth a try at least once. Most of the additional modes of the game are a nice touch that allowed the developer to experiment with the mechanics and gameplay of Shellblast to create varying and different scenarios. Unlike in some games, they do add to the overall value of the game, making it more than worth its asking price, despite the campaign itself being enough. The additional modes are simply a generous serving of dessert. Overall, Shellblast is an enjoyable experience that takes the Minesweeper concept and modernises it in a way that works very well. It isn't a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination, between extreme difficulty curves and the late game losing its way a bit. But put those issues aside, and between the campaign and additional free modes, there is a puzzle game that has a ton of variety and fun. From looking at Shellblast, you wouldn't think of there being much of an atmosphere to the game. After all, it is essentially a case of looking at a grid and attempting to figure them out. But when you actually play it, there are huge amounts of atmosphere to be found thanks to the care and very successfully chosen tracks that play throughout. While disarming normal bombs, there is a whole section of tracks that play, all of which you have full control over what one plays by pressing the music select key. These tracks often take a more relaxing and chilled out theme that works well with the design, backgrounds and the colours that move gently in behind the grids. But where the atmosphere truly shines is when the time is running out. Not only does the music change from a more relaxing tone to one of urgency and panic, but the entire backgrounds and their colour palette changes with it, often to varying shades of red and flashing colours that often depict danger. It changes things from "I'm the best" to "oh shit" extremely quickly. Once that music in the background changes, so too does your confidence, as you really know the pressure is on. It just adds to the overall game, bringing it to the next level, and it is all the better for it. It isn't just the normal bombs, but the nukes also act as a sort of boss fight, you could say. When you start with a nuke level, it has that awesome rock tune that makes it feel like you're dealing with something of epic proportion, along with nuclear symbols slowly twisting clockwise and counterclockwise just to remind you of exactly what you're dealing with. But once the time begins to run short, the music kicks up to full-on heavy metal. The sound of an alarm can be heard, the background lights up tenfold, the screen begins to shake, and the nuclear signs spiral out of control. Everything just continues to get more rapid and aggressive the closer the timer reaches to zero. It gives you that real "I'm screwed" feeling as things get faster and louder. Is a true example of how the atmosphere of a game can make such a massive difference. If Shellblast didn't have the atmosphere it does, it wouldn't come close to being as good as it is. It truly is atmosphere masterfully done. Shellblast is one of those games that are really easy to unappreciate due to its hard to master design. It is a game that at times can feel impossible, but with some patience, a bit of brain power and a few cups of coffee, it is indeed possible. It is a game that is hard to get into and certainly isn't without its issues, but give it time and look past its few problems, there is a unique experience that offers intensity that few games can ever offer thanks to its amazing atmosphere. And with a campaign consisting of over 50 levels along with an array of different and varying minigames, you get a whole lot of content for your money. And with that, I give Shellblast a 7 out of 10. Shellblast isn't a masterpiece, but it is certainly one of the better games alongside the Isle Blue of the Legacy Edition bundle. With 3 of the bundle's games down and 2 to go, it is looking more and more like a reasonable bundle that is worth its asking price. But it isn't over until the surgeon sings.